Welcome everyone to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast, the podcast focused on leadership. The episode will begin shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Dr. John Bedker Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, John Bedker. Well, today we're going to, so to speak, connect the dots. A topic in the leadership world we call synthesis. Let's begin by a quote from E.O. Wilson, noted American biologist. He's known as the developer of sociobiology. Here's his quote. "We're drowning in information while starving for wisdom. The world henceforth will be run by synthesizers. People able to put together the right information at the right time, think critically about it, and make important choices wisely." There we are, the words from E.O. Wilson. Okay, so that gets us going. Let's start with, so what is it? What is synthesizing? Quick, simple, easy description. Synthesizing is one of the core skills of strategic leaders. It's the ability to continually process data. Goodness knows there's a ton of it coming at us all the time from all directions. Process facts, analysis, conversations, and all of this put into insight, to synthesize it into insight. Whether it's synthesizing an analysis, a meeting, discussion, any situation, having your brain derive and prioritize insight from context, that, folks, is a critical skill that really does pay benefit to you each and every day as a leader. So, there we are, a little bit about what it is, a quick quote from E.O. Wilson, and we're off. Okay. One of the things that synthesis does is this idea of sense-making and meaning, what Wick has written about for years in the worlds of scholarship. Sense-making and meaning. Well, in today's information-overwhelmed world, and it really and truly is that, reciting facts, not enough. Giving the quote, if you will, not enough. Leaders need to synthesize and distill divergent concepts to take actions, to lead. It's really quite an advanced skill. And it sets apart those everyday leaders from those really great leaders. Adam Grant, he's a highly respected organizational psychologist. He says this, quote, "The hallmark of expertise is no longer how much you know, it's how well you synthesize information. Information scarcity rewards knowledge acquisition. Information abundance requires pattern recognition." This is a quote from Dr. Adam Grant. Okay, so let's peel this onion just a little bit more. What do we do when we decide to commit ourselves to an area of leadership, to learn, right? To get that training, to gather that knowledge, to practice this craft, this art? Well, we're looking for benefits. How will it benefit me? How will it benefit those I lead? How will it benefit my organization? So, features, and advantages, hugely important. But people buy benefits. Why do I want this? Because of its benefits. So let's start by talking about what some of those benefits are. Well, you want this collective intelligence, right? You want to have a way to effectively harness it. So what happens here is we are saying to ourselves, and again, those we lead, is that the sum is greater than the individual parts. So we call this collective intelligence, a real benefit of synthesizing. It allows you to say, I've got this fact, this idea, this comment, this viewpoint. I'm going to try to put them all together. And they're quite diverse. Well, what do I do? How do I benefit? We benefit when we recognize that the sum of all these ideas is greater than the individual parts. What does this allow us to do? Well, it allows us to build our engagement with others and, of course, to build trust. Because really this synthesized knowledge fosters transparency and trust. And by doing that, you get this deeper commitment to team, to we, to us, to our. One of the other benefits is this enablement component of deliberate prospection. So, synthesis allows leaders and their teams, again, to project future scenarios, to anticipate potential challenges, and, of course, potential opportunities. It goes back to that trite but all-important axiom we all know, right? Prior proper planning prevents, let me skip the words and go to prevents poor performance. But really is prior proper planning leads to success because it allows you now to anticipate, to engage, to have those discussions, which will benefit not only you, but those you lead. One of the ways it does that is by creating a common purpose. This gives that notion of a unified narrative, which is aligned. And what happens when you get this unified narrative and you are aligned? Well, of course, you wind up in a more cohesive organization, a more cohesive team, and a more motivated organization. Okay, so just a couple there of making sense in meaning. Well, we want to buy the benefits. So what are some of these benefits? And again, just quickly, harnessing collective intelligence. Yeah. Building engagement and trust, for sure. Enabling deliberate prospection, that prior proper planning idea. And creating a common purpose, which really leads to more cohesion and more motivation. Okay, so when we talk about developing this as a skill, how are we going about doing it? Well, one of the ways to do that, of course, and I've mentioned team a few times already, is that really this notion of active inclusion. You want to harness the diversity that surrounds you. Well, one of the ways you do that is to not control the stage, right? Don't try to dominate the airtime in your get-togethers. You want to make sure that many voices, a bunch of voices, contribute to the informed decisions that you all are going to reach. One of the ways to do that is to ask generative questions. Yeah. What you want to do is stimulate a discussion, stimulate thought. Because these generative discussions are going to go beyond facts. That spreadsheet tells you something. The analytics tell you things. But they really don't delve into the feelings. They don't delve into motivation. They don't give you that contextual nuance that's so very, very important. But when you ask these open-ended queries, the answers can really be insightful. They're going to cause people then to pause. Because what's going on here is what we call in leadership intentional listening. I often, with my clients, have called it active listening. Not just the words, but the unspoken messages. Because I could sit here and quote an analytic, for instance, but not tell you what the contextual nuance was. But if I'm listening actively to the person, going beyond the data, beyond the analytics, and say, let's make sense and let's make meaning of that. So now I might be hearing something differently. Okay? Why? Well, we want to question. It's not that we want to doubt in the negative, we want to doubt in the affirmative. Because what we really want to do is explore the possibilities. We want to question our very beliefs, our assumptions. We don't want the group just to say, well, that's the number, we need to lower it to this. Okay, so we'll do that, period, end of story. No. There might be a much bigger and deeper story as we begin to probe, as we begin to listen, as we begin to explore, to ask questions about the nuance, about the context. Well, what are we really doing here? Now we're taking the time as a leader to invest in what we euphemistically call joining the dots, right? Connecting the dots. But in this case, not only the obvious ones, for instance, an analytic dot to another analytic dot, what that means, but maybe the unexpected ones. Okay? Bringing together those diverse perspectives. Ideas that might have at the beginning seemed unrelated, but now seem like common threads. So, exploring unexpected associations will, in fact, perhaps lead to a new and better solution. So this is really a sense-making story, right? Synthesizing. How do we make sense? How do we make meaning? How do we connect the dots, so to speak? Well, let's take the two important questions, right, that I'm sure you're already thinking. One is why leaders do it. We've talked about the benefits. Certainly that's a reason to do it. But in particular, leaders synthesize for a number of reasons. One, to create clarity from complexity. So we're in this world that's a little crazy, right? We have information overload, data overload, facts overload. And what synthesis does is allows us now to begin to find some clarity from all that complexity, because we are going to again try to connect dots from divergent places. That in turn enables decision making, allows leaders to move beyond the data into what we call insight-driven solutions. It also allows you to align the organization, Again, this cohesion, this trust, this sum being greater than the individual parts. It ensures this alignment, reduces confusion. This idea of a shared vision really comes from there. Driving action and results. So effective synthesizers, leaders, they produce better results because that action is driven from a thorough review, a synthesized review, rather than merely a data-driven review. Well, then what's all this come down to about why leaders synthesize? A topic we've talked about many, many times, and that is the building of trust. Because you're communicating clear, actionable, and thoughtful messages. And their leaders earn trust. Because this conduct, this exploration truly is trustworthy behavior. So a little bit here on the how. How do we go about doing this? I'm saying we sit down, we have a meeting, it's more nuanced, but how operationally? Well, immersion certainly is one way. You've got to read extensively. You got to listen to these diverse voices and research to understand oftentimes messy, difficult questions. And here's what happens with leaders. They often have filters, gatekeepers. Information with clarity oftentimes doesn't get to the leader because of these filters, because of these gatekeepers. Oftentimes, like-minded people certainly you want on your team, but the diversity of opinion and experience, understanding a piece of data that might be nuanced, but not knowing the nuance, doesn't allow one to get to that condition of clarity, and certainly not in a complex world. So we have to immerse and gather from these different voices. Sorting and connecting. At some point you have to understand what's relevant and what's not, right? Talk about leadership, doing the right thing. We know what the difference between right and wrong is. We really and truly do. Well, same thing here. If a piece of information is not relevant, it should be discarded. Same thing with disparate ideas. If they're not of value, it should be discarded. But to listen to one voice, and one voice alone, equally not the right thing. Reframing. So we're going to look at all these different types of points of view, these different inputs, unfiltered. Well, this might cause some reframing, because instead of just analytically driven, we now may need to incorporate something like empathy or objectivity, something not purely nor completely analytical, because those might be essential to framing a story properly. Well, then we're going to have to draft a narrative. Why? Because we need concise stories. The world we live in can't sustain, book form on every topic. This idea of sound bites can be troubling, can be wrong, can be inappropriate, but oftentimes they are narratives that are critical to communicate. And then we need to test them, right? In the case of requests for proposal, RFPs, many of you know this, you'd sit down and have a red team, right? To try to poke the holes in that proposal. Try to pre-think all of the downfalls of what you are attempting to present. Well, you probably need to have a red team as well in your synthesis process as a leader, to understand what not just the benefits, but the pitfalls could be, and play that if this, then that game, because testing is important. Okay, connecting the dots, synthesizing, really pretty important, right? Particularly in our world today. Complex, just an immense amount of information out there. What do we do with it? How do we make sense? How do we make meaning? We need to synthesize information to benefit not only ourselves, but those we lead in the organizations we work for. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Take care. Talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tell your friends, and, of course, please follow our podcast and subscribe. Thank you again for tuning in.